Morning, and thank you for joining Kuiper and VMware for day 2 of our Big Breakfast series. I'm delighted that you can join us, and I hope you've got a brew and maybe even a little bacon and egg on the go too. My name is Stuart Hall, and I'm Director of Kuiper. Today I'm joined by my colleague and Head of Sales, Neil Jelly, plus some very special guests from VMware. You'll notice I've said it's day 2 of our series, so if you weren't with us yesterday, please don't think you've missed out. I'll provide you with information on the rest of this modular series at the end of the presentation. I will start by answering a question that will be on the tip of your tongue. However did you come up with the name of Kuiper when people can barely pronounce it or even spell it? It actually relates to the Kuiper belt in space, which encompasses much of the universe as we know it. Our mission is to go above and beyond for our customers and help you to universally embrace IT. We act as a broadline provider, covering everything from standard hardware and software, right through to telecoms, managed services, and even digital signage. We've been a proud partner of VMware for many years, and as their portfolio has expanded, we've found that our customers have become ever more interested in how they can build upon their existing investments and take advantage of what VMware has to offer. This series has been put together based on the questions that our customers most frequently ask us, and we're delighted that VMware has agreed to join us. Welcome again to the second in our webinar series. I'm now going to hand over to Neil to ask today's Big Breakfast, Big Question. Over to you, Neil.
Thanks, Stuart, and I hope everyone is well today. So for day 2, we're asking the question, how can we better manage the escalating number of endpoints? Why is this question important? Well, it's important because while end users may be delighted that they can access their data and colleagues via mobiles, tablets, laptops and numerous apps, for IT this often results in multiple management systems leading to duplication of effort and room for error. So fortunately, VMware have developed Workspace ONE Unifying Endpoint Management, a solution designed to allow you to manage the full lifecycle of any endpoint device from a single management console. And here to talk to you about it are 2 people I'm excited to introduce. Today joining us from VMware are Paul Whitten, End User Computing Solution Engineers Manager for UK and Ireland, and Darren Hirons, Senior Solutions Engineer for Digital Workspace. Over to you, gents.
Thanks very much, Neil. Okay, I will just share my screen and we'll get going. Okay, so yeah, today is day 2 for anyone that missed day 1 yesterday. Today we are looking at modern management. Now I'll explain what a lot of these terms such as modern management mean as we go through it. Now, I'll start off by recapping the Workspace ONE solution slide and the components which constitute Workspace ONE for the purposes of anyone that missed it yesterday. So yesterday we focused on this blue layer at the bottom. This is what we refer to as the access layer, and this is the layer which contains the end user facing parts. So this is where we saw yesterday the intelligent hub services, the things like the application catalog and people search, etc. The bits that the end user are going to actually use, and that included things like single sign-on and conditional access and multi-factor authentication. Now, moving up the stack, we move into the unified endpoint management layer, this green layer, and this is where we're going to focus today, right? This is the management of all these devices. So we've got 2 different parts of this. We've got the standard and then the advanced, depending on what it is you want to do. But this encompasses management of all these devices that Neil was just referring to. Moving even further up the stack, we've got the intelligence layer, which we touched on yesterday when we were talking about the digital employee experience management, how we can harvest all these metrics from devices, users and apps, and we can actually do something meaningful with it to make the employee's experience better. And then the top, you'll see we've got some Horizon components as well. So we're able to do shared virtual desktops, virtual applications. We can publish those, and we can wrap all that up and manage it with this just-in-time platform, which we're going to talk more about tomorrow, by the way. And then lastly, we can also layer onto here full VDI as well. So this is full VDI, Windows 10 desktops, and this can be on premises or it can be in any one of a number of public clouds. And again, we're going to go into that in more detail tomorrow, but today we're focused entirely on that green layer in the middle. And we have still got some add-on components that can be bolted onto these solutions. So we've got Assist, which we're going to talk about today, actually, and we've got Security, which encompasses the carbon black solution, which we're going to talk about on Friday. Yeah, but today we're going to focus on this concept of modern management. So let's get going. So there's a bunch of acronyms. I apologize in advance. There's a bunch of acronyms in today's presentation. I'm not going to dwell on these. I'm usually quite good at calling out and reading them out fully, so I'll try to do that today. If anybody gets the slides afterwards, or you can refer to this if you want to know what any of the acronyms mean. So let's start off by reviewing where we've come from in terms of being able to manage all kinds of devices. So let's focus on mobile device management first. So being able to manage and the requirement to manage mobile devices really came about from the year 2007. The key thing that changed everything in 2007 was the release of the iPhone by Apple. This was the first time that people had a device that they actually wanted to take to work, and they actually wanted to do some work tasks on it. So the key one being, lots of people started bringing iPhones into work and saying, you know, can I get my email on this? Can I do X, Y, or Z on this? Can I get an application to run on this? So out of this requirement from people bringing in these personal devices and trying to use them for work purposes was born this concept of mobile device management, or you might have heard it referred to as MDM. Now, as this matured over time, lots of other capabilities got bolted onto it. Things like mobile application management, which is the management of just the application, not the whole device. And then we've also got things like mobile content management. And there are many, many more, such as mobile email management, for example. But essentially what happened over time is this solution evolved from just MDM into what you might know as EMM, or Enterprise Mobility Management. And really, it just encompasses all these different management tools in one platform that can manage mobile devices. So this is like, you know, Android, iOS, iPads, etc. So that's kind of the evolution of mobile device management. When we start to look at desktops, and by desktops I'm including Windows and macOS, by the way, we're really talking about PC lifecycle management. So we're talking about being able to manage the whole lifespan of a particular device for an end user. And when we compare it to a mobile device, it's a lot more complicated. So we've got several different layers we have to take into account. So we've got to worry about the hardware, right? We've got to manage all the updates to the firmware and the drivers. We've got to worry about the operating system. We've got to worry about keeping that up to date in terms of feature updates. You know, with Mac, that could be Catalina to Big Sur. With Windows 10, it could be, you know, 1909 to 2003. And also we got to worry about the monthly patching of those operating systems as well. We've got to worry about the application lifecycle management, how we can personalize that desktop for that person. So that could be something simple like, how do we publish printers to their machines? How do we give them drive mappings or access to cloud data repositories? And then lastly, we need to be able to push policies to be able to manage and secure those devices. So we've got a lot more things that we've had to do over the years for desktops rather than mobiles. And as a result, there's a whole ecosystem of tools out there. I'm sure that everybody on this call will recognize some of these tools. But there's a whole raft of tools out there that people have used to accomplish managing all these different layers. So we've got like SCCM is a really common one. Almost everybody out there will, I'm sure, have used group policy at some point. We've got Jamf, which is typically used for managing Macs. We got tools for doing imaging, which we're going to talk about more later on today, by the way, but tools like Norton Ghost. I spent many a day locked in a room imaging machines day after day after day. They eventually let me out though, don't worry. But then there's all sorts of other tools as well, which we can use to make minor configurations like PowerShells and scripts and registry changes. And then of course, we've got to manage these updates with some tools as well, something like Windows Server Update Services. So when we talk about unified endpoint management, what exactly are we talking about? What we're actually talking about is bringing together the worlds of EMM and PCLM. So we're bringing together the mobile device management world and the desktop management world, and we're wrapping them all up into a single platform, which is unified endpoint management. So what you'll see out there in the market is you'll see some tools which still may be referring to themselves as an MDM. You might hear some that are referring to themselves as an EMM. If you hear those terms, they're managing mobile devices and they're focused on mobile devices. If you hear PCLM, they're focused on desktops. If you hear the term Unified Endpoint Management, as in the Workspace ONE case, we're talking about being able to manage the whole lot. So just keep that in mind. So there is a lab available. I mentioned these yesterday, but there is a hands-on lab service that we run via a website. If you just Google VMware hands-on labs, you'll find it. And there is a specific lab about getting started on Workspace ONE UEM. These are hands-on labs. You can there's a manual that you can walk through, and it shows you how to configure this and do some of this cool stuff we're going to show you today. So when we talk about unified endpoint management, what we're really talking about is that green layer that I showed you at the start. And there are several different stages throughout a device's life cycle that we need to worry about. Firstly, we need to worry about how do we onboard those devices? How do we make that as streamlined as possible? I don't want to be locked in a room imaging machines day after day after day anymore. Once we've onboarded them, how do we configure them? And throughout their life cycle, how do we support them? And how do we keep them secure? So all this is wrapped up and encompassed in the Workspace ONE platform through a lot of these green boxes that you can see at the bottom. Just to drill into each one of these sections a little bit deeper, when it comes to onboarding, we've got several different methods of being able to streamline the enrollment. And again, we'll cover that shortly. When it comes to configuring those devices, we can push settings and policies to those, and we can do that using intelligent assignments as well. We don't have to, manually assign it to devices. Devices can be in dynamic groups, for example. We want to be able to manage the whole application lifecycle, adding apps, removing apps, updating apps. We want to be able to do enterprise integrations into other different platforms. And we want to be able to control the way that the device looks and feels in its layout as well. From a security point of view, we want to be able to do all the security features like manage BitLocker and manage File Vault and all these other encryption tools. We want to be able to do data loss prevention for applications, and we want to be able to wipe those devices or enterprise wipe them if they were to get lost or stolen, to keep that device's information secure. And then from a management and support point of view, we want to be able to collect all these insights, and we want to analytics and report on them, like the stuff that I showed you yesterday. We want to be able to do meaningful data with all this, meaningful things with all this data that we're collecting. We want to be able to give users the capability to do self-service. We don't want to make them non-productive. We want to give them the power to keep being productive. And we want to be able to help users when they have issues through remote management. So we'll cover that again later on in the session, but these are kind of high-level overview of what we're trying to do with the Unified Endpoint Management platform. Now, when it comes to delivering Workspace ONE Unified Endpoint Management, we've got 4 different ways of delivering it. So the first 3 that you can see on the screen, they're all cloud hosted. And then the 4th one, as you can guess from the name, is an on-premises version which runs in your own company data center. Now, the difference between the first 3 is fairly minor. The shared SaaS version is a multi-tenant cloud environment. So you're sharing a tenant with lots of other customers. You don't see them, they're all isolated, but effectively you're on a server with other customers. All the updates for that tenant are managed by VMware, and that tenant's updates are done by VMware when VMware chooses to do them. Customer has no control over when they happen. But that's by far the most popular platform. When we move on to latest mode, the difference there is that the customer is in a single tenant environment. So they're not sharing that tenant with anybody else. They're not, and then this is particularly useful in environments where a high level of security is required. The customer still doesn't have any control over when the updates occur though. When we move up to managed hosted, that's an isolated environment and the customer has full control over when it's patched. So depending on what your requirements are, depends on which solution you would go for in that stack. So let's move on and let's focus on onboarding. So how do we easily get those devices into the hands of those end users, and how do we get them productive as soon as possible? Again, there's a lab on this, there's a code for it. If you want to search for that code, you'll be able to do the lab on this. Now, before we're going to manage any kind of device, we really need to think about, 2 things. How are we going to manage it, and who owns that device? Because if somebody's bringing in their own device, they're not necessarily going to want the company to be able to manage it. So this is definitely the case with the green box on the left. So any personally owned devices, we're back to this concept of bring your own device, where people are bringing their own devices into work. They aren't going to want the organization to be able to look and see what they're doing and what they've got installed, etc., etc. So we've got to think about maybe only managing the work apps on that device, not the full device itself. Moving into the blue section in the middle, these are business-owned devices, corporately owned, might even be rugged devices, for example, used in somewhere like a warehouse, for example. Now, these can be fully managed because they're owned by the organization. What we're starting to see more and more of now is the box on the right-hand side, this concept of COPE, or corporately owned, personally enabled, where an organization owns the device and they provide it to you as a user. They fully manage it with what's called a work profile, but essentially you can use it for personal use as well. It's kind of think of it like a device with a split personality. Half of it's managed by the company and half of it's your own personal device. This is becoming more and more popular as time's gone by. Well, when it comes to onboarding these devices, we've got various mechanisms, and this isn't even a complete list, right? So when it comes to onboarding mobile devices or desktops, we've got things like out-of-the-box enrollment, we've got manual enrollment through either the hub or a browser, we've got token enrollment, we've got what's called NFC bump enrollment, we've got QR code enrollment, and we've got factory provisioning. Now, some of these terms won't mean anything to you. We're going to cover some of them today, but just be aware that there are lots and lots of onboarding mechanisms that we've got for different types of devices in different scenarios. And we have some decision trees which can help you get to a conclusion if you're trying to choose the right one as well. So for now, we're going to focus on out-of-the-box enrollment. So the idea of out-of-the-box enrollment, as the name suggests, is an end user can take a device out of the box and they can turn it on for the first time and they can get up and running as quickly as possible. And we want to be able to do this for all different types of devices. Now, some of you out there may have already been doing it for things like mobile devices for a while now, but probably not doing it for desktops. And historically, the problem with desktops has been this concept of imaging. So you get a device delivered from the factory. That device has already got a perfectly usable version of Windows on it. The first thing you do is you take it out of the box, you wipe off that version of Windows and you put your own custom version of Windows on. It's a very cumbersome, long-winded, process, doesn't scale, you can't do many at a time. It tends to slow down getting that device into the hands of the end users. What we're trying to do with this modern form of onboarding using out-of-the-box enrollment is we simply give that device as it arrives from the factory to the end user with that base OEM operating system already installed on it. We enroll that into Workspace ONE and we get all those changes that you've made in your custom image. We get Workspace ONE to apply all those. That's all possible through the Workspace ONE platform. So let's take a look at what out-of-the-box enrollment looks like in terms of process flow for a mobile device. So first of all, a user will take a mobile device out of the box. They'll turn it on. It'll ask them to connect to some Wi-Fi. What that'll do then is it'll connect to the vendor device service. So if it's an Android device, it'll connect to a Google platform. If it's an Apple device, it'll connect to an Apple platform, for example. If it's been bought with that vendor's out-of-the-box enrollment program, you've told it in advance to recognize the unique attributes of that device, for example, its serial number, and you've told it where to go and register. So when it hits that vendor device service, the vendor device service redirects it back to your Workspace ONE platform. Workspace ONE then prompts the end user to enter their domain credentials or their corporate credentials, whatever they might be. The end user enters their credentials, it enrolls the device for them, and it fully configures and secures that device. IT have played no part really in actually holding that device and setting that device up. It's all been enrolled and configured by the end user. Now, when it comes to desktops, this is exactly the same. The end user takes the MacBook, for example, or the Windows 10 device out of the box. They turn it on, they get prompted for Wi-Fi. It connects to the vendor service. In this case, it could be Apple, it could be Microsoft. That redirects them to Workspace ONE, prompts them for some credentials. They put the credentials in, the device enrolls, and it fully configures and secures itself. So whether we're now talking about desktop operating systems or we're talking about mobile operating systems, the out-of-the-box experience is exactly the same for both. And just to go over these individual solutions in a bit more detail and tell you the naming conventions for them, because the naming conventions are a bit different. So Android refer to this functionality as zero-touch enrollment. So you buy your devices through a zero-touch reseller. They will automatically register it against your company, and then when you turn those devices on, it'll go straight to Workspace ONE. It's really simple. With Apple, you use Apple Business Manager and the device enrollment program. This applies to MacBooks, iOS, and iPads as well. You just simply buy them through a device enrollment program vendor. And when it comes to Windows, you can buy these from anyone, any reseller, and they'll be able to give you a spreadsheet with the codes in that you need to register these with some service like maybe Autopilot, for Autopilot and Azure AD integration. Or we can do this without that using factory provisioning, which I'll show you in a second. Just be aware though that you don't need to be using a Microsoft platform to use Autopilot. You don't have to have the devices managed by Microsoft to use Autopilot. We totally have control to be able to integrate with Azure AD and Autopilot. We have all the same functionality as Microsoft do. So another way we can do out-of-the-box enrollment is through a concept called factory provisioning for Windows 10. So there is a lab for this as well, if you want to have a more detailed look at this. So what are we trying to fix with this, right? So the idea is that when you order a machine from the factory, from a PC vendor, for example, its life starts in the factory. So this is the green boxes at the top. The device gets built. It then typically goes through whatever internal factory processes it goes through. It then gets shipped to you as a customer. As soon as it's shipped, its warranty started, and et cetera, et cetera. And when you get that device, it'll probably sit in a cupboard for a while. Then you'll take it out of the cupboard. Your IT staff will probably go through that re-imaging process, and they'll probably use a tool like SCCM or something like that to re-image that. And then they'll patch it. They'll install some departmental apps on it, and they'll maybe put it back in the box until it's ready to go to an end user. This is all slowing down getting that device into the hands of the end user. At some point, when they decide who to allocate that machine to, they'll take it to site or they'll take it to that person's desk. They'll install it. They then might have to install some specific custom user apps that user might need. They might have to migrate some data from the old machine. Then they might have some trouble tickets that they might get logged by the end user, and they might have some kind of mop-up tasks to do afterwards. The thing to remember here is this is a long-winded process, right? And it takes a long time. And the longer this process takes, that's the more impact that's having on the end user. What we're trying to do with factory provisioning is remove all those unnecessary steps. So what we're doing is we're still getting the machine from the factory, but you'll notice there's an extra box in there, which is provision image. So what we're doing is we're customizing the image in the factory. Now that's not necessarily customizing the whole version of Windows that's on there. We're not basically moving the imaging task into the factory. What we're doing is we're just applying some customizing files into that image. So they're referred to as like PPKG, which you can see in the text on the right. What that basically means is that when a machine gets turned on for the first time, it knows exactly where to go and enroll itself. And in some cases, we can even get it to pre-install some applications as well. So what we can then do is we can ship the device from the factory, not to the IT department, but we can ship it straight to the end user. So as soon as the end user gets the device, we've cut out all that time that's required, all that effort, all that manual effort that's required by IT. We ship it straight to the end user. The end user takes it out of the box, turns it on, connects to Wi-Fi, puts in some credentials, and it fully configures itself. This is the concept of factory provisioning. Let's move on now. Let's leave onboarding and let's talk about how we configure these devices. So keep in mind that everything in Workspace ONE is built to be managed over the air. So this is, I mentioned this yesterday, but it's never been more important to be able to manage devices now that we're working in this time of the pandemic where everybody's been forced to work at home. We need to be able to manage them over the air because we can't rely on people being connected to the internal network. So by being able to manage them over the air, we're able to push out management settings to those devices, and we're able to manage the policy and the security of those using things like Wi-Fi settings, device restrictions, and get updates to them, for example. We can do the full lifecycle management of the applications, and we can apply data loss prevention policies to stop leakage of data out of those devices when they're off the network. We can secure those devices with things like BitLocker encryption or file vault or whatever type of encryption you might be using. And we can control the access management through the catalog that we showed you yesterday. And in terms of asset tracking, because those devices are cloud managed and they're always talking back to the platform, we can see exactly what's happening on those devices at any time. We can do software inventories, we can check who owns the devices, etc. And when it comes to creating configuration profiles for these devices, you can see on the screen just a screenshot from within the console, and we'll see this more in the demo at the end, but we can choose which platform we want to create a configuration for. So we've got Android Enterprise, we've got Android Legacy, we've got iOS, we've got macOS, we've got tvOS, we've got Chromebooks, we've got Windows Rugged, Windows CE, we've got Windows 10, and we've got Linux in there. So whatever type of device you're wanting to manage, we can create a config profile for it from within the Workspace ONE UEM platform. Just want to focus for a few minutes on how modern management's changing Windows 10, because I'm sure most of the people on the call have got Windows 10 devices. It's by far the most common, and you'll no doubt be managing them in the legacy method of things like group policies, etc. So when Microsoft built Windows 10, they wanted to move to this world of modern management. And so they introduced a new way of being able to configure Windows 10 devices. So obviously you can still configure them with the old methods, you can still use group policies, etc. But what you might not know is that there is something in Windows 10 now called configuration service providers. And they're basically a type of API. Think of them like an API that you would get on for configuring a mobile device. They're now baked into the Windows 10 platform. So all that we're doing with Workspace ONE UEM is we're pushing these configuration service provider settings over the air to the devices. When the devices receive them, the agent converts them into whatever registry settings or files it needs to change, and they get applied to the operating system. So just remember that configuration service providers are just a modern over-the-air way to configure Windows 10 devices. And when it comes to configuring the rest of the Windows 10 stuff, we've got a whole host of capabilities, and we can do the full PC lifecycle management of these. So when it comes to onboarding, we've already talked about, we can do factory provisioning, we can integrate with autopilot, we can get users productive as soon as possible. From a configuration point of view, we can do all this over-the-air management with these configuration service providers. We can still deploy group policies, we can still do that. We can even do it over the air as well. We can manage things like the BIOS and the firmware on some devices. And because these devices are always connected, we can track their configuration at any time. It's not like when you've applied some group policies and somebody's gone off site for a month and you don't know what sort of group policies are applied to the machine. We can tell at any time. When it comes to patching those devices, we can do it over the air. We no longer rely on them coming back to a patching server internal. We've got granular control over those patches, and we can make use of some delivery optimizations as well. So we can get patches we can get machines to search for other machines on their own network before they'll go out to the internet for those patches. When it comes to software, we can do full lifecycle management of Win32 applications. We can still use that company app store that we showed you yesterday, and we can do peer-to-peer sharing of apps as well. So all this peer-to-peer technology helps cut down on the internet traffic, and maybe this can be especially important when you've got lots of people maybe coming back in at the moment when they're working at home to get applications and patches, etc. They might be clogging up your VPN. And then finally, on the end, we got security. So we can manage all the things like encryption, like BitLocker. We can manage, we can set up all the data protection on the device, and we can do things like make use of some modern Windows 10 features like Windows Information Protection and Device Health Attestation, which checks the posture of the device. And if you're worried about migrating from, these solutions that we've had in for many, many years, like SCCM, and moving to modern management, it's not as difficult as you might think. We've got a tool that ships with Workspace ONE called Airlift. And what Airlift does is it connects to your existing SCCM platform. It also connects to your Microsoft Active Directory, and it can convert your group policies into CSPs, which is really cool. It does it with Fire. And it will also move and migrate all your device collections, and it'll move and migrate all your applications out of SCCM and into Workspace ONE. So it does a lot of the heavy lifting and shifting for you. You just have to re-enroll the devices. So let's switch now to looking at how we manage applications and what we can do with application lifecycle management. So we covered some of this stuff yesterday. So we know that we've got the unified app catalog. We can present this to any device, and that can contain internal apps, public apps, purchased apps maybe through the Apple VPP program. It can contain web apps and remote apps and virtual apps and desktops. We know that we can do single sign-on to cut down on things like user fault calls, password resets, for example. We can apply application configuration changes to these apps as they get pushed out. We can choose from two different deployment methods, auto or on demand. Just to explain the difference there, auto is what you might think of as traditional application deployment. You click push on an application and it gets delivered and installed on someone's device. On demand deployment, on the other hand, basically means it gets put into the catalog for self-service. So that explains the difference there. And anything in that catalog can have conditional access policies on it. So they can be based on what the device is, the device health posture, whether it's been compromised or not. They can be where the user's located, what network they're coming from, and who the user is, what groups they're a member of, for example. We also have a bunch of productivity applications that come with Workspace ONE as well. So I'm not going to go through them all, but you'll recognize some of them. We've got the hub in the top left, which we've talked about a lot yesterday. This is the agent that does the device management, but it also provides the hub services like the application catalog. We've got Boxer, which is containerized email. We've got Web, which is a containerized web browser. We've got Content, which can securely deliver content. And then along the bottom row, we've got things like Verify, which provides a two-factor authentication. And we've got Tunnel, which you can use from any platform to create per app VPN, which means that an end user, without having to even know there's a VPN on their device, can open an application, and behind the scenes, that application can be configured to create a per app VPN tunnel back into your organization and access an internal resource. Let's take a look at how easy it is to actually deploy an application to a device. And in this example, we're using a Windows 10 machine. So you'll see we're in the console here, and we're going into apps and books, and you'll see we've got some applications that are already uploaded. We're going to try and deploy one of these using the auto method, and then we're going to do another one using the on-demand method. So we're going to try and deploy Chrome using the automatic delivery method. So we're going to set some parameters in here for the deployment. We're going to give it a name. We're going to choose which devices we're going to assign it to. In this case, we're just going to send it to all Windows 10 desktops. We're going to choose, maybe we want to choose a particular date we want this deployment to happen. Maybe we want to even pin that down to a particular time. Here you'll see we can choose whether we want the app delivery method to be auto or on demand. In this example, we just want to push it and install it, so we're going to select auto. But you'll see that we also get the option to display it in the catalog as well. Once we've done that, we're going to click create, and that creates the assignment. We then save it, and it's going to show us a preview of the devices that will be affected. So in this example, you can see it's going to be pushed to 6 desktops. Once we click publish on that, we're going to jump across to the desktop, and immediately, because this is happening over the air, it doesn't matter where that device is. It could be in somebody's house, they could be working remotely. But what's going to happen is that after a few seconds, that's going to start being pushed down to the device, and you can see it's appeared on the desktop after just a few seconds. Now, what we're also going to do is we're going to open up the application catalog on this device, and we're going to try an on-demand installation. So we're going to go into here, and we're going to launch Workspace ONE Intelligent Hub, and we're going to try and install Adobe Reader using this. So you can see the installation says that it's installing, and after a few seconds, you'll see that it will appear on the desktop in exactly the same way. But this has been performed by self-service. So you can see that Adobe Reader has now appeared on the desktop. So that's the 2 different delivery mechanisms we've got for software, and they're the same across all the platforms, whether you're on an Android device or a Windows device or a MacBook. If you want to, you can do an auto deployment or an on-demand deployment. Let's switch focus away from Windows now. Let's have a quick look at macOS. So for macOS, we've got all the same sort of capabilities. We're building on that MDM core capability, and we're adding on things like extra agent capabilities, per app VPN tunnel, integration with tools like Chef and Puppet and Monkey, for example. We're also layering on that the identity and access management layer, that blue layer again. And then also we're able to collect all that intelligence data from these devices as well. And we can actually do more than just the MDM APIs that Apple make available as well. You can see at the side of the green layer, the policies that Apple make available. We actually add capabilities with our agents, so we can do things that other vendors can't do with macOS. Moving on to Chrome OS, we haven't talked too much about this, but we can also manage Chromebooks. So we can do all the same things that you would do through the Google Enterprise Management Platform. We can do all those tasks through the Workspace ONE UEM platform, including configuration management and application delivery. And we can also still use the hub services and application catalog, etc. Let's switch now to, we've onboarded the device, we've configured the device maybe, we've talked about some stuff about application delivery and patching. Let's talk about how we then go on to support that device, right? So it's inevitable that at some point during the app's lifecycle, it will have some issues or the user will report some sort of fault with the device. What we ideally want is that when they call the help desk is able to launch a remote session wherever that device is and whatever type of device that might be. Might be a mobile device, might be a tablet, might be a MacBook, might be a Windows device. And we can do this using the Workspace ONE Assist feature. So the user brings up the help desk say that they want to do a remote support session. The user already has the Assist app pushed to their device by Workspace ONE, and the remote session's initiated and the help desk is able to fix the issue. Let's take a look at what it actually looks like. So in this example, we've got the Workspace ONE console. So the end user calls up and they speak to the help desk. The help desk is able to search for this person and find the device that's got the issue. They can then go to the remote management section, and this will initiate a connection to the end user's device. Now remember, this device could be anywhere. It doesn't have to be on the corporate network. This is all happening over the air. So once that's made a connection, we get a number of different options. We can either screen share it, we can manage the files on it, or we can just initiate remote commands through the shell. Once we select the option we want, it's going to initiate a series of steps to check it's all functioning properly, and eventually it will connect to the device. Now the employee will see on the screen that the Assist launches, and it will ask them for a PIN. This is to verify that that the help desk is who they say they are, and that the right people are asking for access to their machine. So the help desk will be given a PIN. And this PIN will be read out over the phone to the person at the other end, and they'll type that PIN in. Once they type that PIN in, screen control is given to the help desk representative, and then they're able to go off and do whatever they need to do to resolve that issue. So I'm going to stop sharing my presentation, and I'm going to show you how easy it is to set up these profiles, these configuration profiles, and how we've unified this regardless of the different device, right? So I'm going to just share my screen, and I'm going to show you the Workspace ONE UEM console. So I'm going to sign into this. And you'll notice that once I sign in, I'm taken into the Workspace ONE UEM console. Now, the bit that we're interested in for the purposes of this demo is the device configuration. Now, you'll see that the device configuration page has a main dashboard. It tells me lots of information about the devices that I've got, like, when they were last seen, what type they are, what security vulnerabilities might exist on some of them, how many I've got of each platform, and operating system version, etc. What I'm interested in is creating profiles. So if I go to the profile section and I click add profile, you will recognize this screen from the one I showed you before. So this has got a couple missing from the screenshot because these are configured in my platform. But if I want to create a profile, all I need to do is select the type of device. So in this example, I'm going to pick an iOS device, and I got a choice. Do I want to create a profile that's assigned to an end user, or do I want to create a profile that's assigned to a device? Now, there might be some times when different users use multiple devices. So it might be more applicable for the profile to follow the end user around rather than assign it to the device. Well, on the flip side, if it's a configuration device that you want permanently to be in place on the device, it's more likely you'll create a device profile. So for this, I'm going to create a device profile, and you'll see I'm always taken to the general page. I can give this a name. I can choose which smart group I want it to be assigned to. I can do exclusions if I want to stop it from going to certain machines. And down the left-hand side, I have a list of all the payloads that are available for that operating system. And so if I click on one, for example, like restrictions, you'll see that I get all the restriction settings that are available in the iOS profile. So what this means is that I can now select any of these options. So I could disable the camera, I could disable FaceTime, I could stop it from pairing with an Apple Watch. All these things are all available. There's hundreds and hundreds of settings. And you'll see down the side, it tells you which iOS version these were supported in. So there might be some restrictions based on what version of code your iOS devices are running. When I've done that, I save and publish it, and it'll push that config set into that device. Now, just to prove to you that with the unified endpoint management platform, we have completely joined this up and made this seamless. The experience is exactly the same if you're doing this for a desktop operating system. So if I wanted to configure a MacBook, for example, I get the same options. I can push a user profile. I can push a device profile. I go into it. The settings are exactly the same. I get the options to give it a name. I can choose a smart group. I can still do exclusions. I get all the payloads available to the MacBook. I could click on software updates. I can click on configure, and I configure the settings that I want to push to MacBooks in terms of software updates. I save and publish it. Those devices get that update over the air. And if I wanted to do one for Windows, for example, I can add a profile, choose Windows. Windows Desktop is Windows 10, by the way. Again, I get the option, do I want it to be a user profile? Do I want it to be a device profile? I can choose a device profile. Again, it looks and feels exactly the same. Your end user, your IT users don't need to manage different tools. They don't need to learn different tools. So again, give it a name, we choose who we want to assign it to, and we've got all these settings available to us. So, if we wanted to configure, let's say, we wanted to configure the firewall, then we can choose the payload for firewall, we can click configure, and we can configure all these settings. And it's just really, really simple to configure. When we've finished, we click save and publish, and wherever those devices are, these settings get pushed over the air and they'll be applied within seconds. So that is, in a nutshell, how easy it is to create configuration profiles for any type of device within the Workspace ONE UEM platform. And that is the end of my presentation today. I'm going to hand back to Neil.
Thanks for the presentation, Darren. It's really timely content given the number and types of devices that employees are trying to access the corporate environment with these days. And of course, everything you've seen today and this week is available through Kuiper. And now we welcome any questions from you through the Q&A box. And we've already had some great questions through. The first one, this is very much focused on enterprise-size organisations. Smaller companies can work more effectively, but at what point does this platform become too big for the business? I.e., if you're an SME with less than 50 employees, is the system too big and cumbersome, or does it still have benefits that can be leveraged by an SME? Now, Paul, I believe you wanted to take this question.
Yeah, quite happy to pick that one up, and it's a good question, Andrew. And yeah, we've got a huge number of customers in that sizing that use this today, from 20 devices upwards. So it's not as big and clunky as it looks. It's very, very simple to manage. For our own environment, we manage everything within VMware's estate of 38,000 users globally, with a handful of IT staff. once you've got an understanding of how to drive the console, it's really simple to work through, and we can work closely with Neil and Stuart and the team to take you through, what your use case is and what aspects of Workspace ONE UEM you would require, and how you would deploy that. So it's connect with the guys, and we can arrange a session with Darren or one of my team to take you through that.
Fantastic, thanks, Paul. Another question: if I want to start managing existing Windows 10 devices, is the way to onboard them remotely?
Darren, do you want to pick that one up?
I can take that one, yes. So if you want to manage existing devices, there are various ways that you can do it. Obviously, you can manually enroll those devices. The most common scenario is any existing devices are more than likely joined to your Active Directory. So we can utilize Active Directory to push out and silently enroll those devices into Workspace ONE. So the end user doesn't even know that it's happened. The other thing we can do is we can make use of PC Lifecycle management tools to do that. So if you're currently managing them with SCCM and you want to transition to modern management, we can actually use SCCM to push and install the agent and silently enroll the device as well.
That's great, thanks, Darren. I've got two questions actually, which are very similar to one another. The question is, one of our guests has asked how, if a device is factory provisioned, how does that work with any PC manufacturer? But then the same question was asked in a slightly different way: what happens if it isn't factory provisioned? So perhaps you can explain both of those together.
No, that's a good question. So we do have a mechanism to allow end users to not end users, IT departments to actually apply the factory provisioning process within their own business, right? So that process that normally happens in the factory when you buy a device from Dell or HP or Lenovo, for example, we give you the tool to be able to do that in-house. So you can do this from within the Workspace ONE platform. You can create those configuration files. We then give you a tool which applies those configuration files to Windows 10. And then when you reboot those Windows 10 machines, they go through the factory, they go through the process as if they've just come out of the factory. And they'll automatically enroll into the right place, and they'll have all the applications already installed. So you can go through and create the same process as you've done factory provisioning, but you can do it manually in-house.
Okay, thanks, Darren. Another question: how does this manage the various Office 365 licenses which are assigned to each user group?
So the Office 365 license is still assigned to the user. So we can do federation with Office 365. So we can stop the user from having to sign in again when they go or visit Office 365. We can put Office 365 apps into, for example, the app catalog that are single sign-on. We can also deploy Office 365 onto an end user's device. And when they click on one of the Office 365 apps, the federation is done silently in the background using single sign-on by Workspace ONE. So the end user would never be prompted for a username and password. That would all be handled by the Workspace ONE platform. So we don't do anything specific around the licenses. We just single sign the user on based on who the user is.
That's great, yeah. So it certainly makes it easier to manage. Another question: what statistics of the client machines does it monitor? For instance, free space on hard disk, memory usage, CPU usage. Can this replace something like Spiceworks monitor?
So the answer is we can manage anything. We have a function in Workspace ONE called sensors, and the idea of sensors is you can deploy a sensor to any device and it can capture any bit of information you want. What you can then do is you can feed that sensor information into the intelligence platform and you can report on it, you can create dashboards on it, and you can do automations based on what comes back as well. So an example could be if you deploy a sensor that checks for hard disk space, and you could feed that information back into intelligence, and you could create an automation that says, if my hard disk space is less than 1 gigabyte, I'm going to delete the contents of the temp folder or something like that. So you can use this information you're collecting through sensors to be able to do automated tasks to stop issues from happening for end users.
Thanks, Darren. Again, it's great to see all this additional support available from VMware. So it looks like there's no more questions for now. So I'll hand over to Stuart for our poll. Take it away, Stuart.
Thanks very much, Neil. And yeah, some amazing questions. I kept hearing the pings of everything going off, so it was brilliant. So I don't know about you, but personally, as a director of a company myself, we used to do things the old-fashioned way. And remote working last year with COVID and everything, it just made provisioning a nightmare. So even for us, we're roughly a 30-user organisation, but Workspace ONE genuinely has changed our company forever. I hope from this presentation you actually see how, and I know that ahead of IT, stress levels have most certainly come down. But it is important that these sessions resonate with you. So what I'd really like to understand is whether today's content has answered our big question successfully. So we have a quick poll for you. I think you should now be able to see the polling buttons on the screen. There we go, just popped up. If you can't see them, just pop your answers in the chat if you can. So can you tell me, based on what we've shared with you today, how comfortable do you feel that VMware could reduce the number of endpoint management solutions you have without compromising performance? A, somewhat, B, a lot, or C, I still need persuading. So we've got very, somewhat, or I still need persuading. So if you can cast your vote now, please.
This is where I'm on the edge of my seat.
We know if we've convinced people or not. Just waiting a few more seconds for the results to come in. Oh, brilliant. Okay, then. So 69% said very, excellent. 31% you still need a little bit more convincing, so we'll work on that with you. And nobody still needs persuading, which is fantastic. That's exactly what we wanted to see. So for those who said somewhat, we'll dig deeper a little bit more and find out what else matters to you. So thanks everyone to your valuable feedback. That's fantastic. So then looking forward to the rest of the week. As I mentioned at the beginning of this session, this is day 2. Yesterday we looked at how improving user experience benefits IT, and over the coming days we're going to address 2 further areas of interest. Tomorrow, the 28th, which is Thursday, losing my days, it's virtual desktops and apps, and on Friday the 29th, to end the series, it's securing the enterprise. If you've not registered and you still like to, please feel free to drop me a message and we'll get a link sent over to you. We're also making all the sessions on demand, so you'll be receiving information on how you can access these recordings if you can't attend in person. So then, I'd like to extend my thanks to you all today and to our speakers, to Paul and Darren, for illustrating how VMware can simplify and enhance endpoint management for IT. Of course, we'd love to speak further with you, but rather than list all the different capabilities we have, I'd like to leave the final words to our customers, because we've got some kind words up on screen that I believe highlight not what we do, but how we do it. I very much hope that you can invite Kuiper to partner with you in the very near future as well. So over the next few days, we will approach you for some feedback about today's session and to see where you stand now that we're moving beyond, the business shock of 2020, and we look forward to ways we can strengthen and adapt our business for the future. If there's anything the team or I can do for you, please get in touch. Thanks for taking part, and from everyone at VMware and Kuiper, it's been great to have you with us, and enjoy the rest of your day.